Hello, class. Stephen Russell here with my informative speech, The Industrial Revolution, a Pittsburgh Story. As many of us know, Pittsburgh is also known as the Steel City. But how do we get that name? Of course, we produce steel, but there were many cities during the American Industrial Revolution that produced steel. So how did the name stick with Pittsburgh? And what was Pittsburgh's role in the American Industrial Revolution? So before we get into steel, Pittsburgh was known for trade and agriculture, crops, whiskey, furs, rifles, things of that nature. As people, this was important for people who traveled from the Northeast over to the West, which made Pittsburgh the main gateway because of our river systems. Now, in 1760, Coal Hill was discovered. Coal Hill was important because later it was labeled as the most valuable coal deposit or mineral deposit in America, but it also supplied Fort Pitt during the war efforts. And Coal Hill was actually modern day Mount Washington. In 1792, the commerce grew so big that Pittsburgh had to start producing ships to move supplies in and out. Ships were so big that you can actually ship them out to Europe. Also in that year was the birth of the iron industry in Pittsburgh, the Shadyside Iron Furnace, but it didn't last that long. It only lasted about a year. Now, with the expansion of the West, cities like Cincinnati and Louisville started to take over as the main trading centers, which prompted the start of the Erie Canal, which was completed in 1825. Now, because of the Erie Canal, it actually stunted the growth of Pittsburgh because it routed the traffic north. But despite that, between 1825 and 1874, the population actually grew from 86,000 to 533,000 because of coal. Now, in 1860, the iron kicked back up along with the glass industry, which became our main economic focus. Now, in 1870, the Monongahela Incline was built. The reason why this is important is because it sped up travel time up and down the hill, so we were able to get coal down to the river or down to what is now known as Carson Street, and it made the process a lot faster. Now, in 1872, Andrew Carnegie, which was known back then for his investments in railroads, visits England. Now, this is the start of it all because he was introduced to the Bessemer steel process, which he was convinced was a great idea. So in 1873, upon his return, he began construction of the Edgar Thomson Mill, which is strategically located in Braddock, which is still there today. Now, in 1875, the Edgar Thomson plant was completed. Now, there were two major players, outside of Carnegie. Captain William R. Jones was the plant manager, and Alexander Hawley, who was the plant engineer. Now, the reason why Hawley is important is because he was an expert in a Bessemer process, so it made the startup a lot easier. Now, the Bessemer process is actually named after Henry Bessemer of England, and it was a relatively cheap and efficient way of producing mass steel. Now, during this process, you also had to use coal to heat the steel up, but the coal had to be purified. So the purified coal is called coke. And how you do that is by heating up the coal without using oxygen. Now, the furnace was actually patented in 1855 by Henry Bessemer. This process removes the impurities from the pig iron. So the carbons and things like that were actually in the iron. It removed that, and the reason why the coke was so important is because the more pure that your coal was, the more pure that your steel turned out. Now, Captain Jones, he was credited for refining several of these processes and increased the plant's efficiency, including how to transport the molten metal from the Bessemer furnace. So because of these improvements in efficiency, the U.S. Steel increased its production from 6,451 tons to 1,187,770 tons, with approximately in approximately 15 years. Now, the reason why America had such this profound growth because the Edgar Thomson Mill, they actually contributed to about 60% of all of America's steel at the time. But the reason why this was because, again, the strategic location. The Edgar Thomson Mill was built between the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad and the Pennsylvania Railroad. And then, of course, it sat right along the Monongahela River. And this allowed them to ship raw materials and finish rails with ease. So Carnegie began to build a network of mills, coke plants, and furnaces all along the Monongahela River, starting from Homestead down to Monongahela, which is further south, which would be Charleroi area, now right off of Route 70. So when he did this, he also created the Carnegie Steel Company, and he partnered with Henry Clay Frick, the owner of the coke plant that they used to supply the Edgar Thomson Mill. Now, they were relatively unmatched until about the late 1880s. That's when they started to have some internal issues with strikes, worker complaints, things of that nature. And on top of that, there was a 116-day nationwide strike, which really put a hold on steel production in America. Now, because of this nationwide strike, companies began to purchase their steel from other countries. So naturally, because things are starting to be imported, the domestic market started to decline. So Pittsburgh, being known specifically for steel, really suffered because 75% of our steel mills were shut down. So as you can see, that's the reason why, or how America played such a major role, because if it wasn't for Andrew Carnegie and people like Henry Frick, the steel industry would have never blossomed the way it did. How they were able to put people in place to refine processes and make it faster and be able to build extra factories. So I would like to thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed my speech and learned something from it. Have a good day.